Welcome to the Write Good Books podcast, the audio companion to WriteGoodBooks.com, with your host Jason Bougger.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the podcast. I'm Jason, joined again by our co-host Scott Michael Childers.
Hello.
Hello, how you doing?
I am doing just fine today.
Excelente, excelente. I'm teaching the kids Spanish, so that's the word I know.
The word.
The word.
Well, as long as they know as much as you do.
It's pretty cool at that young age. They just absorb it, though. They know the colors and animals, and you name it, they got the nouns.
So they should be here doing our next podcasting for us.
Yeah, they should be doing this beginning because we're failing at it. Because we're going to talk about beginnings today and how to do a good one.
Yeah, and that was an example. Non-beginning.
Of a non-beginning. So what do you think? Well, actually, let's define a beginning.
Yeah, that's a good place to start.
We'll talk about it. You know, it could vary for certain people. Some might want the beginning to be the setup. Some might want to be straight to the action. For me, I feel like it's kind of where the story begins, and that could be the first couple pages, or it could be the first chapter. What do you think?
I think for today, let's focus on just that. I don't want to put a percentage because, you have the epic fantasy, so if we say 1/10, that could be still 100 pages. Mm-hmm. Just the first few moments of your story.
That's a real good way to
That's a
look
real
at
good
it.
vague way of saying that.
Sure. It might have some setup, it might have some action, but it's really where your story starts.
Right. And it's also going to be that, and we'll probably talk about this part later, it's going to be what people decide if they're going to keep reading or not. So we'll probably talk about that part a little bit later.
Okay, sure. So I think, what should you do in your beginning to make sure people want to read it?
Okay. Well, I think there's two things that are pretty important in those first few moments of your story, your novel, your epic trilogy of trilogies, is when you set the tone for the rest of the experience and you start making promises. I think you're doing those two things in your beginnings. The tone is this going to be a light, fast-paced read? Is this going to be a heavy, elaborately written type of piece? Heavy on dialogue, heavy on action.
Yeah, and you should be able to determine that in the first few paragraphs as a reader.
Yeah,
I think.
At least the first few pages. You should have a good grasp of the tone of the story. Now, tone is going to change up and down as you do your scenes, but the overall type of story that you're telling should be apparent in your first few moments.
With theme of absence, I know right away if it's going to be a real telling versus showing story, or if it's going to be real dialogue heavy or action heavy or pure description, or you can tell that tone pretty early. Yeah,
heavy on narration and the point of view and all of that stuff.
Right, and I agree with you on making promises. Real quick, before we get to that, I wanted to throw in I think you should also introduce your character and give a sense of the setting in that opening scene as well. But making promises.
Well, let's actually talk about what you brought up. Is you're introducing character or characters and setting. Yeah, that's part of it too. But as you go through your story, depending if you're character-driven or plot-driven, you may not have to do too much introduction of your character because that's what the rest of the book is doing.
Yeah.
It's introducing the character. It's showing them growth. But you need to have that starting point and make it clear. This is where this character starts. Maybe not your whole roster of characters, but at least one of your main POV characters. And then settings, that way people can get into the moment. I think that's part of the tone. How you describe the environment. Do you leave a lot up to the reader, or are you very detailed about your descriptions? So I agree with those two. Those are also very important.
You don't want your reader to wonder where they are after the first few pages, or when they are.
Yeah. Unless you are writing one specifically to disorient, because that is how you want the whole story to be.
The Illuminatus trilogy.
I will neither confirm or deny the existence of that trilogy. But you could do that for effect, but you want to do that on purpose.
Right. Like you said earlier, in this opening scene, the writer does make promises to the reader. What do you mean by that exactly?
Oh, okay. And I also want to make clear that this is not the only time that you will make promises.
Oh, that's very true.
It'll happen throughout your book. But what you're doing is you're setting up the expectations the reader will have as they go through your piece. Now, you're not explicitly going through and saying, and by the end of the book, I will have told you the secret of the ancient ways. What you're doing is you're bringing up these questions, and that means you're making a promise to the reader that some of these questions will be fulfilled in one manner or another. It may not be the way they are expecting it to happen, but the answer will be forthcoming.
Right. You're giving them a setup where you're hoping your reader will ask questions that they'll expect answers to as the plot is resolved.
Right. And so you want to set up some of those bigger promises that are going to take your whole story to fulfill. I think we could spend a whole episode on promises, but you'll also be maybe unintentionally setting up some promises that you won't know you're promising until you have someone else read your book and then ask you, well, why didn't you go into this?
That's very true.
But that, the whole, this is the entry to the world. You're opening a door and they are looking at this panoramic view of people, places, things, and ideas. And so you're setting up, these are the ideas we are going to explore. This is how it's going to look as we explore them. I think those first few moments are what's going to tell a reader, this is a book for me, this is not.
I agree completely. I think that's a great way to look at it. I wanted to talk about next where your story should begin.
Oh, yeah.
You'll see some books might drag the beginning out and you'll lose people pretty quickly doing that, or you might throw too many characters in at once or too much setting in at once. And I think you should start your story at the inciting incident that will drive the plot for the rest of your narrator or your main character's character arc.
Well,
I suppose.
At least for the point of view character that you just introduced, right?
Right. That's true with multiple point of view characters. And then you might look at a more global incident, I suppose, that'll drive the rest of the story. Mm-hmm. But I guess what I'm getting at is I could use my book as an example. My first draft, I had 25 pages of basically nothing happened, just character interactions to get you to know the characters, and then the action that starts the novel took place. Well, after workshopping that, I realized, why did I have those 25 pages there? I should have started it with the scene that sets the plot into motion, the inciting incident, I guess the kids call it.
Really? There's not a hashtag in front of that?
There could be. That's what they do. We joke. But yeah, I think it is important to, it was said to me, keep the back story in the back of the story. Don't throw all the backstory in that first chapter. Figure out what you need and then spread it out throughout your book. Yeah. Don't just, here's my list of things, basically.
Yeah. You don't need to do all the world building before we open that door.
Right.
Or as we open the door, you don't have to be setting the table or whatever metaphor you want to use.
As a reader, you don't want to pick up a book and have a 15-page info dump.
Yeah.
Because you'll get lost, you'll forget stuff, and that's boring.
Yeah. Well, and I'm reading a book now which the main story didn't start until 200 pages in, or it feels like that anyway. And most of the stuff that started the book have not been and will not be referenced in the later parts of the book. They are completely irrelevant except to do this slow build where it could have been done in flashbacks or in dialogue or some other method than, like you said, that info dump right at the beginning.
Yeah. And it's also only show exactly what you need to get the story started. If there's going to be characters that you'll need later, if they're not necessary early, don't throw them in, because nothing's worse than having 15 characters thrown at you in the first page.
Yeah.
Especially if there's nothing to differentiate them, and you'll just confuse people. That's just what I think.
Well, that's pretty good. That's a pretty good start.
It's a good start.
Yeah,
to a
there's
book.
bad
Yeah.
pun there. But yeah, I agree completely where doing the world building info dump shows, see how much effort I put into my world.
Mhm.
No, let us see how much effort you put into the world as we visit it,
Right.
as we explore it through your story. We don't need the guided tour.
Right. As a side note, it might be helpful to write that.
Oh,
and Use it for
absolutely.
your own reference, and maybe not even use it. But
Well, like even in your book, right? You wrote those first 25 to get you to the point where you knew, here's where my story
yeah,
starts.
and I knew the characters then.
Yeah. So in your first draft,
So-
don't worry about having the perfect
Mhm.
beginning, because what'll happen is you'll find that as you revise.
Right.
And-
What you plan to be the beginning may not be the beginning on your third draft.
Uh-huh.
Or if you outline, I have something pretty large outlined right now, and I know that what I have outlined as the start will not be the beginning of the first book in that series, because that's how it goes. You learn as you write. Who is it that always says, come in late, leave early? Is that on? I don't remember.
I don't know either, but if you want to, you can look that up and
Yeah,
add
it's
that
a good
in.
quote. No, start late, but don't start too late.
Yeah, you're setting you're setting the scene,
Mhm.
and for some stories, the appropriate start would be the middle of a fight scene,
Right.
right? Depending on genre and what the author's intent is, and all of that. In this could be the same exact plot and character, but if you want a different feel, you may start at the argument that starts the fight, or you could be talking about how two people bumped into each other at this event, or it could be the night before where one of them is saying, "Oh man, that's..." So, what is that impactful, inciting incident will also determine on where the rest of the book you want to go. What emotional responses, what character arcs, what's the plot, where are you taking us? Start at the starting line. And depending on those other variables, that starting line may be, like I said, the night before the fight, in the middle of the fight, after the fight. I woke up unconscious
Mm-hmm.
and broken glass was everywhere. In some stories, that's a perfect beginning.
Right.
A mystery novel, a noir type of thing.
Yeah.
Epic fantasy, maybe not the best start.
Maybe not. Another way to not start a story is with a false start.
Yeah.
Don't start with a dream sequence or something that's going to draw in your reader and then say, hey, that's not really what happened. Or,
Well, that's a broken promise right there.
yes, it is.
You're
Good
setting up a
example.
promise of this fantasy world or whatever, and then chapter 2 comes, and then bang, that was a dream, and we never revisit it again.
I don't think I've ever read a dream sequence opening that I found useful. Yeah, I mean, it might be. If you're writing a book about dreams or something, it might matter. But or there's, sometimes it might be okay to have an how do you say this? Like the Stand, Stephen King starts with two characters who both die at the end of that scene, but their purpose was that they brought on the super flu.
Well, let me throw this at you. The superflu is a character in The Stand. It's not just a plot device.
It's the antagonist.
It's
It's one of the antagonists.
maybe. We'll leave that to the critics to decide.
There you go. That's good. What other false starts are there? Or just a narrator who lies. I'm not a big fan of the unreliable narrator, but a narrator who's opening with a lie to his reader could be a poor beginning in my.
Well, here's the thing though. In that case, if you expose the lie right away, as part of the beginning, he lies, and you're shown it's a lie right away, so the promise is the narrator is going to withhold or give you false information the
Okay.
rest of the book. That's a promise to the reader that your narrator is going to take you down some weird paths that may or may not be true. Now, if he lies, and then the first reveal of the lie is 200 pages, 300 pages in the book, you set up a promise that you're going to have a narrator. The narrator isn't trustworthy later on. It turns things off.
Yeah.
So it's all in those first moments, and you can do all sorts of things, but you've got to fulfill. Here's the setup, and here's a a promise given and a promise already filled in those first few moments to show the reader that you can trust the author to do all sorts of things with you. And it may not be the normal path. So if you're doing those dream sequences or those line narrators or something, you've got to show it and reveal it really quickly. Otherwise, you're going to get what you've been talking about.
Yeah.
I had a promise. The promise was not fulfilled. And now I'm not enjoying this book, this story, as much as I used to.
Right. Good points all. You know what? Let's close up with the one thing everyone says don't do is prologues. And I guess we should say, why does everyone say don't do prologues? Every time I look at agents giving interviews or whatever, they always say, I hate seeing a prologue at the beginning. Why is that? Because some prologues do work. Think of the Star Wars trilogy.
That's
we love that prologue at the beginning. Maybe it's just the music, though.
Well, I mean, take a look at the James Bond films, right? You have a completely different story to start the film, and then the rest of the film, which may or may not be linked to that first action sequence. But what that prologue is doing is setting the scene. Right? And so I think this don't do prologues is just another one of those rules that everyone thinks is a rule, but really may not be a rule.
Ooh, interesting.
Now, I think where some of the agents may not want it is they want to see what the meat of your story is going to be. And the prologue is just, it's an extra chapter that doesn't show what the rest of the book is going to do.
And it may not always show some of the stuff we said you should include in your beginning.
Right,
and
right. You're not making...
That could be a turn-off.
Yeah. So I think that is more of a practical matter than a creative matter. And there are certain tales that don't need prologues. You should just go right into your story. So use prologue, in my opinion, I would use a prologue sparingly and not count on it every single time.
Yeah, good advice. I think if I have anything close to prologue, I'd probably just call it chapter 1.
Yeah. And I think the prologue, if you are doing a prologue, it needs to be very different than what the rest of the book is. So that way it's not confused. It's like, well, why isn't this chapter 1?
Yeah.
So.
And I think this is a good place to end the beginnings.
And next time
we'll talk about endings.
It'll be the beginning of the end.
The beginning of the end is upon us.
But a bum.
Oh my.
Yeah. We'll work on a better ending for next week, because this is the Beginnings podcast.
Yeah, that's true. We didn't plan ahead. Well, thanks for putting up with us. And check back next time. See ya.
See ya.